And welcome back, Professor Almeida, jpalmeida.com, and in this video I want to walk you through a Windows-based practice image. This is intended for CyberPatriot coaches and their teams. You can actually build customized practice images for your teams to train with. You can also do the same thing with Linux too. All you need is a Linux ISO. You can go to ubuntu.com and download the ISO for Windows. You just need a Windows installer, whether it's Windows 8 or Windows 10. Now, for CyberPatriot 11, they are using Windows 10, but this practice image here is based on Windows 8.1. The concepts are more or less the same, and you'll get a pretty good idea of what competition may be like. So let's get right into it. What are the tools you're going to need? VMware Workstation Pro, something to basically build a virtual machine, create the vulnerabilities in your OS, work with that scoring engine, and then releasing your image to your students and then exporting this virtual machine out as an OVF. And you want to export as an OVF to make your life a lot easier. So I've extracted the Simpsons. I have it staged right here. And believe it or not, if you have a fast USB flash drive, you can run your virtual machines off of that. Also, it goes without saying that your computer hardware should be able to run virtual machines in the first place. I have a pretty powerful system here. So let's go ahead and get started and power this virtual machine on. So you can see Windows 8 is starting up. And one of the things that your team should consider is creating a checklist. It's very crucial that you keep a checklist of different things that you should look for, and especially as you are working through the different vulnerabilities in this system here. So here's my Windows 8.1 system. The admin account's password is the super secure change me. Now, one thing to consider with all of the accounts on this system, you should set secure passwords for each and every one of them. So here we are. We are in Springfield, and on the desktop you will see the Simpsons here. This is the README. You will also see a shortcut to the score report. So we're going to go ahead and double click on the score report, and this will give you an idea of how many vulnerabilities there are here. Again, we are using a customized scoring engine that you can freely download. So you can see that there are 33 vulnerabilities, and because I've been playing around with this, I fixed one of those vulnerabilities, and we'll get to that in a second. So here's the Simpsons Readme. You know the Simpsons, their PC's a disaster, and it's your job to secure it. Their system's running Windows 8.1. Make sure that it's secure and it receives automatic updates. Now, when you're going through the README, pay close attention to what is being said and what is being implied, because sometimes the README will drop hints of the different things that you need to do or things that you need to fix. So this right here is all about the users, groups, who should be an admin, who shouldn't be an admin, and again, you want to make sure that you change passwords for everyone. But in this instance here, the admin account with the super secure change me, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not scoring that. So again, you want to go through the README and check for all of the different things here. Now, if you need to pause this video to read this README, you can go ahead and do that. Okay, and we're back. So we've reset this back to 0, and so let's go ahead and get started. Probably the easiest way to work with users, groups, policies, and whatnot is by right-clicking on the Start menu and going directly to Computer Management. Now, you can also go to the Control Panel. That's not a big deal either. So I'm going to right-click, go to the Control Panel. You can do the same thing here, going to System and Security, and then to Administrative Tools. You can do that too. Right, that's not a big deal. You can set the local security policy that way. Another way you can do this is by going to secpol.msc And again, it will take you directly to your local security policy. So there's many different ways that you can do this. And we're going to start with our users. So going back to the README here, there's a couple of things that we need to do. So again, let me pull up the README for reference. The admin account is for you, and the password is change me. You should change it. Again, I'm not scoring it. While you're at it, you should give the entire family secure passwords with at least 8 characters. Now, realistically, the minimum should be 10. Okay, but you know, in this practice image, we're just messing around with things. You can set it to at least 8 characters. Homer, having forgotten his password, must change his password at next login. Ah, there's a hint. Okay, so let's take this one at a time here. I'm going to go to local users and groups, and I'm going to click on, hey, what's this? Mr. Burns. Well, we'll get to that in a second. Okay, so I'm going to click on users. This is our admin account. This is the default administrator account. It's built in, but we want to disable it for security. So I'm going to right-click on properties, and I'm going to disable the account and click OK. Now, in looking at this, you can see some of the hints, such as with Homer. Homer has to change password next logon. Okay? Bart was put in a timeout, and his account was disabled. We want to give it back to him, so we will uncheck that box. Okay? The built-in guest account, we're going to disable that too. Now, as we're going through this, you want to pay attention to the score report, and you will see that as we are fixing the vulnerabilities, they will be scored. And you can see there are 33 of them. So now there's 2 items here. Okay, and again, it will take time for it to refresh. Now, we need to go in and make sure that everyone has a secure password. So admin, we're not going to change. Bart's account, we're going to set the password by right-clicking, and we're going to go ahead and proceed, and we can choose a password for him. Okay, so the password's been set. Now with Homer, not only are we setting a password for him, but also, again, looking at the README here, you will see that he needs to change his password at the next login. So I'm going to right-click Properties. User must change password at next logon. Okay, so we do need to fix that. Well, how do we fix that? We're going to go ahead and reset the password. Right-click Properties. There we go. That's more like it. User must change password at next logon. And again, we will set that password for him. So you might have to play around with this. Okay. And again, as we are going through, you want to pay attention to see if you are fixing those vulnerabilities. So you can see 4 of them have been scored right now. All right, moving on to Lisa. Lisa, Bart, and Maggie's passwords never expire. So real quick, let's go to Bart. Password never expires. Okay. Lisa, set a password for her. New password. And we will again make sure that that password never expires. Same thing with Maggie, right? Maggie, you know, even though Maggie doesn't really talk, she's pretty good with computers. And again, we're setting a password for Maggie, and her password doesn't expire. Marge needs a password as well, so we'll set a password for Marge. And finally, Mo does not belong here. So when you are removing accounts, it's important that you also write down the accounts that you're removing, because you might need that information later on. But in this practice image, we can't remove accounts, we can only disable them. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and disable Mo's account by right-clicking on Mo, go to Properties, account is disabled. So Mo's account is disabled, and that takes care of our users. Okay, so if you were keeping a checklist, the first thing you should check is your list of authorized users. Okay, and as you can see, we've already fixed 12 vulnerabilities. The next thing we need to look at is our list of admins. Okay, there are only certain admins we are allowed to have, and for that we're going to go over to groups and we're going to look at our list of administrators. Okay, this is a quick way to see who your administrators are, and Homer, Homer is Homer, and we really don't want him to be an administrator. So we're going to remove him as an admin, and we're going to add back in Marge and Lisa. So this is one way that we can do it. Okay, so here's Marge, right? And let me step away from this for a second because I want to show you that you can even use the traditional method here through the control panel. If I go to user accounts and family safety, and then I go to user accounts, and then I go to manage another account. So as you can see, Marge is an administrator, and I can do the same thing for Lisa here and change the account type and make her an administrator. Now, when I go back to my group of administrators and I get properties, you will see that Lisa's now been added as an administrator. So you have that option as well. Okay, and let's get back to our score report here, and you could see that Lisa and Marge have been set properly as an administrator. So that's our 13th vulnerability. Now, we need to look at policies, right? And I showed you that earlier. So you can go in and run secpol.msc. That will take you to local security policies. Let's look at account policies. Okay, and there's a couple of things we need to look at here. Account lockout policy. This is something that I'm not scoring, but you should really consider. Account lockout threshold realistically should be set between 5 to 50. Now, why is this important? Because someone can brute force their way in, and you want to make sure that they don't get that many chances. So if you set it between 5 and 50, that is a pretty good number. And as a matter of fact, in competition, you might actually be penalized if you set the account lockout threshold too low. So it's always a good idea to set the threshold to at least 5. And to do that, I'm going to right-click Properties, and I'm going to set it to 5. Okay, just to show you here. We're just going to go with the suggested settings. That's perfectly fine. And now let's look at our password policies. There's a couple of things we need to set here. Number one is the minimum password length. Now, realistically, it should be at least 10 characters, but because we're playing with this practice image, we're going to set it to 8. So let's set this value to 8. Oh, so 10, that's the realistic number. We're going to set it to at least 8. Okay, as long as you have it set, that's what's being scored here. Enforce password history, we're going to set this value to 1. Again, you want to have a higher number. This way people can't just be reusing their passwords. But hey, this is the Simpsons here. This is a family PC. This is not something in enterprise. Minimum and maximum password age, again, this is something you want to pay attention to. Okay, so now that we are done with that, let's revisit the checklist. So number 1, we have our list of authorized users. Number 2, you want to look at your admins. Number 3, you want to make sure you password protect all accounts and you enforce password policies. Okay, so that takes care of our users and groups and password policies. Now, speaking of policies, there's a couple of other things we need to look at, and we're going to come right back here. And I'm going to go into computer management. Okay, we need to look at a couple of other things. Okay, so we have users and groups, right? We have our users and groups. We've taken care of that. We look at our groups. We're okay with that. Now, we need to also look at our policies. Okay, and to do that, we can bring up administrative tools. So we'll bring up administrative tools here because I also want to show you that you can use that as well. Administrative tools, Let's look at local security policy. And one of the things that we need to think about is logging who's using the computer, whether they're successful or not, and that's under local policies. And we're going to look at audit policy. Okay, one of the things that we want to do is to audit all account logon events. So I'm going to select this, and I'm going to check the boxes for success and failure. What does that mean? Basically, anytime someone successfully logs on, we want to log that instance. Anytime someone fails, they put in a bad password, they can't get in, we want to make sure that that is being logged as well. You want to make sure that you're always keeping these kinds of logs. That way you can see if somebody's trying to do something that they shouldn't be. Okay, and again, we're going to take care of that in a second. All right, so let's look at our score report here. And again, it might take a little bit to refresh the page. Usually the score report updates about every 30 seconds or so. Okay, so it will, okay, so it's already there. Next up, let's take care of that pop-up from Mr. Burns. One of the places you might want to look is under scheduled tasks, or the task scheduler. Okay, you want to look there and see what's running. Okay, so if you click on the triangle here, let's look at task scheduler library. Maybe there's something funny going on. Hey, what's this? Smithers. This doesn't look like it belongs here. Well, let's go ahead and get rid of that task. And before I do that, let me show you real quick what it does. You can see there's the pop-up here using the command prompt. So we'll go ahead, we'll get rid of Smithers, and you should see another vulnerability fixed. So one of the things you might want to check is your task scheduler to see if there's anything funny happening there. And again, it might take a second for it to pop up. So take a look at your tasks, go through the list of tasks that are running. And the next thing we want to look at are shares. Okay, there may be shares running on the system that shouldn't be running. So we will go to shared folders and we'll take a look at shares. And sure enough, there are two shares that don't belong here. One of them is cleverly disguised, right? So this is a share that doesn't belong. And you can tell because you can look at the folder path, right? So we're going to get rid of these two shares. Stop sharing. That's gone. And this one's gone. Okay, so you want to be very careful when you are looking at your list of shares. I called one of them Windows just to try to throw you off, but again, you can look at the folder path and you can see for yourself. So those two shares are gone. Let's take a look at our score report. We are up to 19 vulnerabilities fixed. So we've looked at shares. Now, let's take a look at the firewall. Okay, you want to make sure that the firewall is up and running. So I'm going to go to the control panel for this one under System and Security. We're going to go to Windows Firewall, and we can see that the firewall is not running. Now there's three different areas here. We have, I could show you under Advanced Settings. So there's three different firewall types here that you want to make sure that's turned on. And as a matter of fact, if we just use recommended settings, all three will be turned on. Okay, and you should see that show up in your score report. So we have one that is a private firewall, we have one that's a guest firewall, or public, excuse me, and we have the domain profile. So all three were turned on and all three were scored. So make sure that the firewall's running. Not doing anything too fancy with regard to certain ports or other services. So you want to, again, you want to make sure that you are paying attention to those things. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get rid of the firewall here. Now, one of the things in the README had to do with visiting Google, Yahoo, or Bing. Okay, so again, let me pull up the README for you here. Lisa can't seem to make Google, Bing, or Yahoo work. Maybe you'll have better luck figuring it out. Now, this one's a little bit tricky. There is a file on the computer, and it's called the host file. The host file resolves IP addresses to domains. It's kind of like how DNS works, right? If you're familiar with DNS, you have a file on your computer that can resolve IP addresses. And sometimes what the bad guys will do is they will put inadvertent they'll put some certain entries in there that will actually redirect a domain to a certain IP address, making you think that you're visiting Google or Yahoo, but you really aren't. But in this case with the practice image, theoretically, if you try to go to google.com, nothing's going to happen. And I'll show you how to find that. So I'm going to use Windows E to bring up File Explorer, and we're going to drill down the C drive. We're going to go to Windows, System 32, and it's going to be under Drivers, etc. And here's the host file. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a copy of the host file. I'm going to paste it here on the desktop. Now I'm going to right click on the host file and I'm going to open with Notepad. And you can see, sure enough, somebody's messed with the host file, and if you try to go to google.com or Bing or Yahoo, it's just not going to connect at all. So we're going to get rid of those, and we're going to go ahead and save this host file, and we're going to replace it, and we'll need admin rights for this. Okay, so now Google, Yahoo, and Bing should work, and if you take a look at the score report, you should see that the host file is set to default entries. There it is. Host file must contain default entries. So we fixed that. Okay, always check your host file. Okay, so hopefully you're keeping your checklist going here. We've looked at our users, we've looked at groups, policies, tasks, shares, firewall, hosts. Now let's look at services. What I have done here in this practice image, I've turned certain services off and I've turned other ones on. So services which shouldn't be running may have been turned on, and services that should be running may have been turned off. Okay, there's a couple of ways that you can check this. We're going to start by looking at services. So here we are on the desktop. We're going to start by looking at services, and there's a couple of ways that you can do this. Again, I recommend going to computer management. And we're going to look at services and applications. I'm going to choose services here. Now, the things you set in Windows, particularly different preferences, they are stored in what's called the registry, right? And a lot of times people want to go into the registry to try to change things, and it's recommended that you just don't mess with the registry. However, there is a service here called Remote Registry, which allows remote users to change registry settings on this computer. That is not a good thing, right? And if we look under Properties, we will see that it is set to automatically start. We want to make sure that the remote registry is disabled. Okay, that's something you need to check for. Other services like Telnet, that's super insecure. You should make sure that that is disabled. Okay, so the only thing I did here was I turned on remote registry. Okay, at least you want to think that. Let me skip ahead and talk about Windows updates. Okay, you should also make sure that Windows updates works, and we're going to go to System and Security. We're going to look at Windows Update. Turn automatic updating on or off. Hey, wait a minute. Windows Update should be set to install updates automatically, right? And we're going to hit OK. Wait a minute. What's going on here? Uh-oh. Something's not working. Oh, that's not good. What happened? Well, you know what? Let's look at our services here, because as you will see, Windows Update has been disabled. Okay, so we need to fix Windows Update and set it to its default setting. And if you Google it, which by the way you can do, you can Google for things. We're going to set this to manual, and we are going to start this service. Okay, we're going to start Windows Update, and you'll see that we can get points for it. Now, when we come back to our control panel, which I just closed, it's all right, we'll come right back here. and we go to System and Security, Windows Update, turn automatic updating on or off. Install updates automatically. Boom. And now we should get a point for that. Okay, so as you can see, we are 3/4 of the way through. So Windows Update, that service has been set properly, and you should see shortly that Windows Update is on and it's set to install updates automatically, and there it is. Okay, moving right along. There's Windows Update right there. Moving right along, let's look for unwanted programs and files, and this is going to take some digging. I did some sneaky stuff in here, but again, this is something you should put on your checklist. TeamViewer is a piece of software that allows someone to remotely connect to your computer. Okay, a lot of times these scammers, especially when they call over the phone, they call through the landline. They like to target senior citizens. They'll call pretending to be from Windows or Microsoft Office, and then they'll try to tell you that, hey, we noticed that you were doing something on your computer and we want to fix that. And then they try to get you to install TeamViewer on your computer, where then they can basically sell you on the scam. So we want to get rid of TeamViewer. That doesn't belong there. And again, I'm going to bring up the control panel for this. We're going to go ahead and get rid of TeamViewer. So TeamViewer is going bye-bye. And you will see that that is one of the things that's being scored here, getting rid of TeamViewer. Now it's going to pop up a web browser window saying, "Hey, why are you getting rid of it?" Well, we do want to get rid of it. And you'll see again, it's going to be scored here. So TeamViewer's gone. And so that unwanted program is out of here. But if we go looking in our downloads, hey, wait a minute, this shouldn't be here. Let's get rid of that. Now, here's another thing you need to be careful with. And I'm going to show you in the View tab here. I'm going to check Hidden Items. Unwanted files that may be hidden from you. You want to make sure that you get rid of them. And as a matter of fact, there are 3 of these troll face images. And the other one is hiding out in documents here. So I'm going to get rid of these 3. So you want to pay attention to any hidden items that you might not be able to see. And you can do that from the File Explorer by going to the View tab and checking Hidden Items. And those were the only 3 that were there. So we'll go ahead and empty out the recycle bin just to make sure that they're gone. And so you should see at this point, hopefully if this updates, okay, we'll come back to that in a second. Now, another thing we want to look at in our control panel, we want to look at Windows features, because sometimes there will be things that are turned on or things that are turned off that should be there. So one place to look is under Internet Information Services. You want to make sure things like the FTP server, that's not turned on. But as we go down the list, hey, wait a minute, why is Telnet server installed? Let's get rid of that. So we're going to get rid of Telnet server. And depending on the service, or excuse me, depending on the feature that you're removing, this may require you to restart the computer. That's not a big deal because you are still working with the same image. Nothing resets. You will still be able to keep track of those things in your scoring engine. So that's not a big deal. So right now, Telnet server is being uninstalled. Now, one more place to look, again, in your control panel. Okay, let's make sure. Do we need to restart the computer? Well, we'll find out in a second. One more thing to watch out for. We're going to go home. You want to make sure that there's no way for someone to be able to remote into your computer. So I'm going to do a search for remote, and under system you see remote access, allow remote access to your computer. I'm going to take a look at this for a second. And you will see that somebody has set it to allow remote connections. We don't want that. Okay, we're going to set this to don't allow, and we'll probably want to uncheck this while we're at it. And we'll go ahead and choose OK, and that should turn off remote access. We certainly don't want that. And the computer is thinking right now. Okay, fortunately we don't have to restart here, but some other cases you do. And let's go ahead and refresh this page. And again, it might take a minute or two. So again, allow remote access to your computer. Let's check one more time to make sure it's disabled. And you'll see that it's been turned off. We are good to go. And let's refresh this one more time. And as you can see, we have fixed all 33 vulnerabilities. So this is what you can do on your own. You can create these kind of practice images. I hope this video helps you out a bit. If you're a CyberPatriot coach, you might want to do this with your teams, have them trained, because when it comes to CyberPatriot, you want to see rules number 1 and 2 of Fight Club. So a practice image is a great way to train with your teams and with basically with each other. So if you like this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I will see you in the next one. Good luck, have fun with this, and thanks for watching.